What most people misunderstand about they broke the wrong empath is they think an empath is someone easy to use, someone too soft to fight back, someone who forgives endlessly, stays quiet under pressure, and keeps giving even when they receive nothing in return. They look at kindness and mistake it for weakness. They look at patience and mistake it for low standards. They look at silence and mistake it for fear. That is where they get it wrong. An empath is not weak. An empath is often stronger than the people trying to break them. They carry emotions most people run from. They stay kind in places that reward cruelty. They remain thoughtful in rooms full of ego. They understand pain without turning into pain. That takes a level of strength many people will never understand. But because empaths lead with compassion, people test them. They push boundaries. They lie. They manipulate. They drain energy and call it love. They use guilt to keep control. They keep taking because they assume the empath will keep giving. They believe patience has no ending. They believe loyalty can be exploited forever. What they do not realize is that every empath has a line. An empath may stay longer than others. They may explain your behavior to themselves. They may hope you heal. They may give chance after chance because they can see the wound behind your actions. But seeing your pain does not mean accepting your damage forever. And when that moment comes, it is rarely loud. The empath does not need revenge. They do not need to scream. They do not need to destroy you the way you tried to destroy them. They simply wake up. They see clearly. They stop making excuses. They stop abandoning themselves to save others. That is when everything shifts. The same person who once answered instantly becomes distant. The same person who kept understanding becomes unavailable. The same heart you took for granted becomes guarded, not bitter, not cruel, just done. And for many people, that is the deepest shock, because they expected the empath to break down, not break free. They expected tears, not boundaries. They expected endless access, not permanent silence. They thought they were damaging someone fragile, when in reality they were forcing someone powerful to remember their worth. The empath does suffer. They feel deeply. They grieve hard. But pain becomes wisdom when it reaches the right soul. What was meant to destroy them often becomes the reason they transform. So when people say they broke the empath, they usually tell only half the story. Yes, they caused pain, but they also awaken limits. They awaken clarity. They awaken self-respect. And once an empath learns to protect their peace, they become something dangerous to manipulators. Unavailable, they did not break someone weak. They broke the wrong empath. People often confuse kindness with weakness because they only understand strength in its most obvious form. They think power is loud. They think strong people are aggressive, intimidating, cold, or impossible to challenge. They believe confidence must come with dominance. So when they meet someone gentle, patient, and emotionally aware, they assume that person can be controlled. They mistake calmness for fear. They mistake patience for low standards. They mistake empathy for helplessness. But what they are really seeing is a kind of strength they do not know how to measure. An empath does not need to prove themselves every moment. They do not need to win every argument. They do not need to control the room just to feel secure. They can remain quiet because they are not empty inside. They can listen because they are not threatened by another voice. They can stay grounded because their worth is not built on attention. That kind of inner stability is rare. Many people depend on reactions to feel powerful. They need people to fear them, chase them, praise them, or argue with them. Without that, they feel small. So when an empath refuses to play those games, it confuses them. They cannot understand someone who has peace without performance. An empath often sees more than they say. They notice the shift in tone when someone lies. They notice forced smiles, hidden resentment, jealousy behind compliments, pain hidden inside anger. While others focus on words, the empath senses patterns. They read energy, behavior, and intention. But because they do not always announce what they know, people assume they know nothing. Silence is often mistaken for blindness. What many fail to realize is that empaths are usually aware long before they respond. They notice disrespect early. They feel imbalance quickly. They sense when something is off. But instead of reacting immediately, they give space. They wait. They hope people correct themselves. They choose understanding before judgment, and that patience gets misunderstood. Some people see a second chance and think they can keep crossing lines. They see forgiveness and think consequences will never come. They see kindness and think they have found someone easy to use. But empathy does not erase boundaries. Compassion does not mean self-betrayal. A soft heart can still have a strong spine. It takes strength to remain kind after disappointment. It takes strength to stay open in a world full of masks. It takes strength to feel deeply and still think clearly. Anyone can become hard after pain. Anyone can become defensive after betrayal. Anyone can shut down and call it growth. But to keep your humanity while learning discernment, that is real power. Empaths are underestimated because their strength is quiet. It does not brag. It does not threaten. It does not need witnesses. It shows itself through restraint, awareness, and emotional control. It shows itself in the ability to walk away without hatred. It shows itself in the courage to love without losing self-respect, so people judge them too quickly. They see gentleness and assume weakness. They see grace and assume passivity. They see patience and assume permission. Then one day, the empath stops tolerating what they once understood. And that is when people realize too late that they never met someone weak at all. Many people do not exploit an empath all at once. They do it slowly, quietly, in ways that seem small at first. That is why it often goes unnoticed until the damage is already deep. Manipulators understand something important. If they ask for too much too soon, they will be exposed. So they begin with little tests, a small lie, a broken promise, a disrespectful comment disguised as a joke, a moment of selfishness followed by an apology. They watch carefully to see what the empath will tolerate. And because the empath values understanding, they often give grace. They tell themselves maybe the person is stressed, maybe they had a hard day, maybe they did not mean it that way. Maybe this behavior is temporary. Empaths naturally look for pain beneath behavior, and manipulators use that gift against them. They learn that if they show just enough vulnerability, they can avoid accountability. So the pattern grows. They take more time than they give. They ask for support but disappear when support is needed in return. They expect patience but offer none. They unload their emotions, their problems, their chaos, then leave the empath carrying weight that was never theirs. And because empaths care deeply, they keep trying to fix what they did not break. Manipulators often create confusion on purpose. One day they are warm, the next day distant. One moment loving, the next cold. They give affection, then withdraw it. They praise, then criticize. They create emotional instability because unstable people are easier to control. The empath starts focusing on getting back the version of the person they first met. That is how patience becomes a trap. Instead of asking, why am I being treated this way? The empath asks, how can I make this better? Instead of protecting their energy, they invest more of it. Instead of seeing the pattern, they focus on isolated moments of kindness. Manipulators depend on that hope. They know if they give just enough good moments, the empath will question the bad ones. If they apologize just enough, the empath will stay. If they blame childhood wounds, stress, trauma, or pressure, the empath may feel guilty for expecting healthy behavior, but pain explains behavior. It does not excuse repeated harm. Slowly, the empath becomes drained. Their peace fades. Their confidence weakens. They begin overthinking simple things. They feel responsible for moods they did not create. They become tired in ways sleep cannot fix. This is how emotional exploitation works. Not through one dramatic act, but through repeated small violations that slowly train someone to ignore their own needs. Yet manipulators make one critical mistake. They assume empathy means endless tolerance. They forget that empaths learn through feeling. Every disappointment teaches them, every inconsistency reveals something, every broken promise adds clarity. What looked like patience was also observation. And when the empath finally sees the full pattern, the game ends fast. Because once compassion is no longer mixed with illusion, it becomes wisdom. Once love is no longer mixed with guilt, it becomes boundaries. Once patience is no longer mixed with hope, it becomes distance. The person who kept giving suddenly stops. The person who kept understanding suddenly sees clearly. The person who kept trying suddenly walks away. And nothing confuses a manipulator more than losing access to someone they thought would stay forever. The turning point for an empath is rarely dramatic. It usually happens in silence. No announcement, no explosion, no scene. Just a quiet moment where something finally clicks inside them. For a long time, the empath has been explaining things away. They have been translating disrespect into stress, distance into confusion, selfishness into pain, dishonesty into fear. They keep looking for the wounded part of the other person, hoping that understanding it will somehow heal the relationship. But one day, they become tired of carrying meanings that were never theirs to carry. They notice how often they excuse behavior that would never be accepted if done to them. They notice how they keep offering compassion while receiving inconsistency. They notice how much energy is spent trying to understand someone who never tries to understand them. And slowly, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. They realize they were not loving a healthy connection. They were loving potential. They were loving the idea of who that person could become. They were staying loyal to possibilities while being hurt by reality. That realization changes everything, because once an empath sees the pattern, they cannot unsee it. They begin connecting moments they once treated as separate incidents. The lies were not random, the disrespect was not accidental, the neglect was not temporary, the apologies were not growth, they were resets. Suddenly, years of confusion can become clear in 1 week. The empath starts understanding something painful but freeing. Empathy was being used against them. Their patience was mistaken for permission. Their forgiveness was treated like a guarantee. Their willingness to communicate became a tool others used to delay consequences. And this truth hurts. It hurts because empaths are sincere people. They give honestly, so it shocks them when they realize others receive strategically. They stay because they care, so it wounds them when they learn others stayed because it benefited them. But pain can wake people up faster than comfort ever could. The empath begins asking new questions. Not how do I fix this, but why am I accepting this? Not how do I make them stay, but why do I keep abandoning myself? Not what happened to them, but what is happening to me. Those questions mark the beginning of self-respect returning. They stop chasing clarity from people committed to confusion. They stop begging for consistency from people attached to chaos. They stop explaining boundaries to those who only understand access. And something powerful happens next. Their guilt starts fading. They realize saying no is not cruelty. Distance is not punishment. Protecting peace is not selfish. Walking away from repeated harm is not failure. For the first time in a long time, they choose themselves without apology. This is why the turning point feels so strong. It is not just seeing someone else clearly. It is finally seeing themselves clearly too. Seeing how much they tolerated, seeing how much they minimized, seeing how often they betrayed their own needs in the name of love. Once an empath reaches that level of truth, they become hard to manipulate, because confusion only works on someone still doubting their own reality. And the empath is not doubting anymore. They are awake now. And once an empath wakes up, the version of them that accepted less is gone forever. What surprises people most is that an empath rarely chooses revenge. They do not usually scream, expose, insult, or create chaos when they are hurt. They choose something far more powerful. They choose distance. Many expect pain to come in loud forms. They think anger is the deepest punishment. They think arguments, threats, and dramatic endings are what matter most. But emotional consequences are often quiet. Sometimes the strongest response is the complete removal of your presence. That is what makes an empath's silence so heavy. When an empath cared, they gave energy freely. They listened when no one else did. They remembered details others forgot. They offered comfort, patience, understanding, and warmth. They became a safe place. Their presence often carried more value than people realized in the moment, because consistency is usually appreciated only after it disappears. When that energy is gone, people feel the absence immediately. The messages stop. The emotional support ends. The soft place to land is no longer available. The person who once made life easier is no longer participating. And suddenly, silence becomes loud. There are no more arguments to distract from the truth. No more emotional conversations to reset the cycle. No more chances to twist words, make excuses, or buy time. No more access to someone who kept absorbing damage while still caring. Now there is only space. And space forces reflection. Many people avoid looking at themselves by staying surrounded by noise. They keep drama alive so they never have to face what they caused. They keep people reacting so they can feel in control. But when an empath steps away, the distractions often go with them. That is when regret can begin. Because silence does something revenge cannot. Revenge keeps connection alive. It says, I still need to respond to you. But silence says something deeper. I no longer need anything from you. That can be devastating to someone who depended on access. The empath's distance also removes emotional labor people had grown comfortable receiving. No more being understood without effort. No more forgiveness on demand. No more patient conversations after repeated disrespect. No more loyalty while offering little in return. What was once taken for granted now has a value, and many only recognize it after losing it. An empath's silence is not about punishing others. It is usually about protecting themselves. They become quiet because words were wasted. They become distant because closeness was abused. They stop explaining because understanding was never mutual. There is strength in that silence. It means they no longer need to prove their pain. They no longer need to fight to be seen. They no longer need closure from someone committed to misunderstanding them. They choose peace over performance. For manipulators, this is frustrating. They know how to handle tears, arguments, and emotional reactions. Those things can be managed. But calm detachment is different. There is nothing to grab onto, nothing to provoke, nothing to control. Just a closed door. And the hardest part for many is realizing the empath did not become cruel. They simply became unavailable. No insult cuts deeper than being calmly left behind by someone you thought would stay forever. Pain changes everyone, but it does not change everyone in the same way. Some people become harder, some become colder, some let betrayal turn them bitter. But when pain reaches an empath, something different can happen. They transform. At first, the pain feels unbearable because empaths do not feel things halfway. They love deeply, trust sincerely, and invest emotionally. So when they are lied to, used, ignored, or taken for granted, it cuts deeper than most people realize. They are not just losing a person. They are grieving the effort they gave, the hope they carried, and the version of the connection they believed was real. That kind of pain can shake someone. The empath may question themselves. They may wonder if they asked for too much, trusted too much, stayed too long, or missed obvious signs. They replay conversations. They search for where things changed. They try to understand how something they cared for became something that hurt them. But in that painful reflection, growth begins. Because empaths do not only feel pain, they learn from it. They start noticing patterns they once ignored. They recognize how often they settled for crumbs because they believed in potential. They see how many times they abandoned their own needs to keep peace. They understand that compassion without boundaries becomes self-neglect. This awareness is powerful. The same heart that once overgave begins to value balance. The same mind that once excused everything begins to trust intuition. The same person who once feared losing others begins to fear losing themselves more. That is when strength starts forming. Pain teaches the empath to slow down and observe, to listen less to promises and more to patterns, to stop confusing intensity with sincerity, to stop believing love must be earned through suffering. They begin choosing differently. They protect their energy. They become selective with access. They stop explaining boundaries to people committed to crossing them. They no longer chase those who create confusion. They no longer stay where respect is inconsistent. Some people call this coldness. It is not coldness. It is wisdom with boundaries. The empath still cares. They still love deeply. They still feel compassion. But now those gifts are given where they are valued, not where they are exploited. They stop pouring into places that only drain them. This new version of the empath can seem untouchable to those who knew the old one, not because they lost softness, but because softness is now protected. Not because they stopped loving, but because love now includes self-respect. Not because they became distant from everyone, but because they became unavailable to harm. That is what many never expected. They thought pain would weaken the empath. They thought betrayal would break their spirit. They thought disappointment would make them collapse. Instead, it made them clearer. It made them stronger. It made them impossible to use twice. The most dangerous empath is not the angry one. It is the healed one. The one who still has a kind heart, but no longer hands it to careless people. Because once pain teaches an empath their worth, access to them becomes something few can earn and many can never get back.